While the West looks for a peaceful solution for Ukraine, Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul is on his first official trip to Asia. After Japan, he's now come to Jakarta, Indonesia, where we're speaking with him. Foreign Minister, has Europe become a safer place in the past few days?
There's a good chance that this is a step towards security and peace. After all, the American president was very committed in making sure that even the Russian president is now basically considering a halt to the shooting and fighting and attacks on Ukraine, as well as discussions on a peaceful solution with Ukraine. It's also positive that the American president is talking about security guarantees for Ukraine. Those are signs that good progress could be possible for the first time in this terrible war. But now everyone's waiting to see whether Vladimir Putin is genuinely ready to preside over an end to this war. Unfortunately, things are still looking very different on the battlefield.
As you just mentioned, it has become clear that without security guarantees, there will be no peace in Ukraine. President Trump has also stated that he expects Europe, and in particular Germany, to send troops. When and how many?
Yes, that will have to be discussed in detail together. And these talks are already happening, by the way. Careful preparations are being made in terms of military and security policy. I would nevertheless advise firstly waiting to see whether talks even take place. And secondly, if talks do happen, we must see whether an agreement is found that is durable. We're all waiting on Russia for that. Germany has so far never failed to show its readiness to take responsibility in this conflict. From the very start, practically straight after his swearing in, Chancellor Friedrich Merz showed every commitment by travelling to Kiev, by heading many meetings, and recently by accompanying President Zelenskyy to Washington. Germany is taking responsibility in the form of the government and the Chancellor.
It sounds as though you still have significant doubts that a meeting between Zelenskyy and Putin will take place. How big are these doubts, really?
Well, there are obvious doubts because President Putin has not yet said yes to negotiations. President Zelenskyy said he is ready to hold a bilateral meeting with Putin and then a trilateral meeting with President Trump. Where is the yes from Putin? All we're seeing is how he keeps attacking Ukraine every day. All we see is him employing delaying tactics. All we see is him coming up with new excuses and new conditions. He finally has to understand that this war must be ended. On some days, Russia is also losing 1,000 young people in this war. It's a completely senseless war that is so very damaging to Russia and its people. And Putin has to realize that if he isn't prepared to negotiate, there will be further sanctions. Europe, and I think the United States, who are now involved, are prepared for that.
If this meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy does actually take place, where will it happen? Geneva, Budapest, Qatar have been proposed. Is Berlin also pushing to host it?
No, I don't think Berlin has any ambition to host these talks. We're participating through proposals and support. We're ready to talk to any party. We've already shown that, and will continue to show that in the future, but we don't see our greatest contribution as being the venue for these talks. The most important thing is that they take place. There are many good venues in Europe where they can be held. I think it should be as neutral as possible. In the past, Switzerland has always been very good for this sort of thing.
This is your inaugural trip to Asia, and people here are also closely observing efforts to start these talks over Ukraine's future. Depending on the result, could it encourage China to become more confrontational here in the region?
Yes, that is one of the messages that I have brought with me, but that is also understood here. We know how these crisis regions are linked, and we either defend the international rules-based order and peace together, or we lose this battle, and we don't want to lose it. Here in Asia, I was in Japan, but also now in Indonesia too, people are very grateful that in Europe and the world there's a very clear position on Russia's war of aggression. And that's exactly why I said here that a peaceful situation in the Taiwan Strait, for example, is as important for regional stability as it is for the global economy and also for economic and security policy in Europe. People here see that and appreciate that Germany recognizes these issues.
But suppose it actually did come to a blockade, what would Berlin's response be? How would you secure and protect Germany's maritime routes and supply chains here?
I see that as a hypothetical question, thankfully, and can only repeat the call for the rejection of direct or indirect violence. That is our position, and that is the position of practically all neighbouring nations in this region. Otherwise, I believe that the progress around the Russian war of aggression has shown one thing. Many nations are now prepared to work together. We see a coalition of the willing supporting Ukraine, 30 nations. And there are also Asian states, Japan, for example, that support it. So, by the same token, this region has the right to demand solidarity from us. New global partnerships are being created, and something I also hope to achieve for Germany here is that people see us as reliable. We are showing it, and that, of course, we can expect the same reliability from them too. The prospects for that are very good.
Shouldn't China really be involved in the talks over Ukraine's future? Putin is visiting Beijing at the start of September.
China defines its role itself. China is an important country, a huge country, which can have a lot of political influence, which has a lot of economic influence, and is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And for a long time now, we've been calling on China to use these opportunities and help ensure the war is ended. Hardly any other country, any other government, has such a strong influence on Russia as China. Unfortunately, China hasn't used its opportunities so far, but it's never too late.
So you're saying that you would welcome it?
Yes, of course. We've already appealed to China several times, and during my last talks with Foreign Minister Wang Yi, I called for both him and the Chinese state and party leadership to make more explicit use of these resources in their dealings with Russia. I would be very pleased if this appeal was heard in Beijing.
Ich würde mich sehr freuen, wenn dieser Appell in Peking gehört werden würde.
But on your trip, you've also criticized China. You accused it of aggressive behavior. There was an immediate response from China. How do your Indonesian allies, your Indonesian partners here today, see the criticism that you leveled?
This criticism isn't new. And, of course, it is only a reaction to the regrettable behavior that we repeatedly see from the Chinese side. There have also been some serious incidents at sea here, and the violation of court rulings and of borders and of sovereign rights. And I believe that we're allowed to respond to that. We must respond to that. We're all subject to the same standards, whether in Europe, Africa or Asia. My experience in Asia tells me that Germany's position is very valued. It's not anti-Chinese as such, but it's a position that stands for the law, international law, and that is an independent position. Germany expressly offers China its partnership and collaboration. And we find it regrettable that China occasionally shows a rather different side of its behavior. But our hand always remains outstretched, and I will seek new opportunities for discussions with China again, of course.
Your trip to Asia is also about de-risking. Germany wants to become less reliant on China, especially with regards to rare earths, important materials, where dependency is over 90%. Is Indonesia an alternative, and to what extent?
Yes, I think there is more than one way to become less dependent on one another, and de-risking is a strategy that China is pursuing too. China too wants to reduce its reliance on other markets, and I think that's why, ultimately, it understands why Germany and Europe are following this path, which has been explicitly set out by the European Commission. We're doing that consistently, without rushing, but at the same time we continue to pursue an exchange of trade with China, of course. We're not talking about decoupling. That would be separation from China. But what we're seeing now in new and current restrictions in the delivery of rare earths from China reinforces our quest for new trade partners. And Indonesia is a good, new and, I think, reliable partner. It's a large economy with a large population, and we want to use this potential more than we've done in the past.
Und wir wollen dieses Potenzial mehr nutzen als in der Vergangenheit.
In predominantly Muslim Indonesia, the topic of Gaza is a very emotional one. What expectations have your Indonesian partners in Jakarta conveyed to you?
I believe our partners here have seen clearly that Germany has a natural position by the side of Israel as our closest ally, and they see Germany's special responsibility for Israel. But they've also seen that we have a clear position on issues of civil rights, that we see the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and that our political stance has developed on that basis. That has been fully appreciated.
Israel is planning its biggest settlement project in decades. It would be a nail in the coffin for a Palestinian state. All your efforts have failed so far. Wouldn't now be the right time for Germany to recognize a Palestinian state?
No, our position remains that we instead see the recognition of a Palestinian state at the end of a process that must take place between the Israelis and the Palestinians. But this path must, of course, remain viable. And that's why its construction should not be allowed, not even as the kind of settlement we are warning against, and which we would regard as a breach of international law if carried out. I appeal for both sides to recognize now is the time to come to an agreement concerning Gaza, concerning the release of the hostages at last, and to reach a ceasefire so that we can finally make sure that those people who are suffering can be taken care of, and that at the same time security can be created in the Gaza Strip and for Israel. The plan that has been shared by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is a very good foundation, and I hope that it will be accepted now.
Minister Wadephul, finally, may I ask a personal question? The way international politics is conducted today has changed radically. It's faster, more confrontational and to the point. How do you find it?
I try to conduct policy conventionally and not to allow myself to be swept up by every excitement. You always have to be ready to respond. But I think the important thing in international politics is to be reliable and calculable. German foreign policy distinguishes itself by sticking to several basic guiding principles, and by its strong support of international organizations such as the United Nations. And personally, I feel very good in this role and believe we can make a valuable contribution to the resolution of existing conflicts.
Foreign Minister, thank you.
You're welcome.